Well, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for making the effort to come and spend some time with us today. So many great faces, and we just held our Sydney event a couple of days ago. I'm sure this one will be better, but let's just see how we go. I'd also like to thank our sponsors without whom we couldn't put this on. Microsoft, our sustainability partner Cisco, and gold sponsors Commvault, Dell and Palo Alto. We've got an action-packed day here today, and rather than being death by PowerPoint, I'd really like to see that it becomes a day that is interactive. So I really encourage each of you to have conversations with each other because it's really the great insights that you can share with each other as well as what you can learn from ourselves and our sponsors today that takes us to where we need to go next and informs what we do at Logicalis every day. We really want to hear from you as our customers. You're also going to hear from some seasoned CIOs on our panel later on, talking about the balance of how they manage day-to-day and over the horizon while at the same time building a leadership legacy. If you were in IT leadership 5 years ago, I would defy you to have been able to predict what happened between 2020 and 2022, with one of the biggest challenges to face our industry, including plenty of real-world impacts and so much uncertainty like we've never seen before. Added to that, you had to have the need to stay adaptable, to digitise your enterprises, continuing to do that, increase agility and deliver more to our businesses, all while enabling everybody to work remotely and protecting and securing our information assets and the privacy of our customers in the face of ever-increasing threats who took advantage of that scenario. Well, the good news is you made it. But the bad news is now the challenge really starts because you now need to catch up on that digital transformation and innovation curve that you had started 5 years ago. You also have you have the need to be highly digital. You have the need to work from everywhere. You have the need to move faster. You need to do more with less. You need to protect everything. And by the way, don't let the robots take over, but at the same time, embrace AI in everything that you do. It's through these powerful insights that you will learn today and from our various reports that we do that we hope to help to take you on your journey. And on that note, there's no better person to talk about our insights than our global CEO, Bob Bailkoski, who will share with you the journey of our CIO report, which turns 10 this year. Bob.
Thank you very much. I've got to say, I'm loving this kind of like nightclub vibe that this room's giving off. And I also feel I should say, I'm not sure whether I'm disappointed or relieved to hear that the McLaren's actually made of Lego. Thank goodness for that. Okay, thank you for that introduction, Anthony. I'm Bob Bailkoski, Group Chief Exec of Logicalis. And I want to start by saying a huge thank you to you all for carving time out of your really busy calendars to spend the afternoon here with us. I hope you'll learn some industry insights and some data about market trends, but as has been said by Anthony and VB, the best way of squeezing the maximum value out of today's event is by using the networking opportunities to your advantage. So please meet for the first time, reconnect with old colleagues, try to take advantage of that real networking opportunity that today brings for you. So I'll be talking about our latest piece of CIO research, which we've called the future face of tech leadership. And I'll go into some detail in a moment about three key themes that I've pulled out of this year's report. Themes of disruption. Disruption coming from new technologies, disruption coming from the cyber landscape, and disruption coming from this new area of increased regulation in areas that we're not perhaps that familiar with. And in that area, I'll focus on sustainability and environmental regulations. But before I go into this year's survey, if you'll permit me, I'd like to say a few words about the Logicalis Group. You might not realize this, but Logicalis is a global organization. We're in over 30 territories around the world, from Latin America, North America, through EMEA. We're headquartered in the UK, where I'm from, into Asia, in 9 territories in Asia, and of course here in Australia, where we have offices in Sydney and Melbourne, but we serve clients throughout the country. Globally, we have over 10,000 clients, just like you, who are served by over 7,000 colleagues within the Logicalis group. And we call ourselves architects of change, and that might sound a little bit, I don't know, folksy or hokey to a certain extent. But what we mean by that is that our sole aim is to help you deliver the business outcomes that you're trying to drive for your organizations, to squeeze the ROI out of every opportunity from every project that we work on with you. I like to think that when you engage Logicalis here locally, you're actually taking advantage of the brain power of those 7,000 colleagues from around the group. And whatever problem you're facing, whatever project you're working on, I guarantee that we've come across it somewhere before in our network. Okay, that's enough about us. Let's talk about something much more interesting. Let's talk about you. We've done this survey now, as Anthony said, this CIO survey for the last 10 years. And every year we have roughly 1,000 respondents. So it's quite a rich body of data that we've gathered over that 10-year cycle. From large enterprise IT leaders and CIOs, commercial leaders, small business leaders, we've got a rich segmentation of our customer responses overall, or IT leaders' responses, coming from all industry sectors too. And what I'd like to do is just take a few moments to talk you through the journey that you've told us you've been on over the last 10 years. Starting back in 2014, you told us that your number one concern was the threats of shadow IT. Now, a bit of audience participation here. I'd like you to raise your hands if you are familiar with the term shadow IT. Okay, that's probably about 3/4 of you. That's pretty good. Shadow IT is this concept that other departments within your organization were taking control of your expenditure, making decisions without actually including you on how to deploy that expenditure. So think about your CFO choosing the ERP implementation that they want to do without consulting you, but also using some of your budget. Or think about the CMO choosing the CRM tool that they want to use, again, using some of your budget, but not actually consulting you in that decision-making process. And really, what you were telling us back in 2014 was that you were feeling disenfranchised. You felt like you'd lost your seat at the top table. Back to that nightclub point there, where we go. Sorry. And you felt like you'd been pushed down into the metaphorical basement of your organization, not really involved in strategic decision-making. Fast forward a couple of years to 2018, and this was the first year, believe it or not, I was staggered at this looking back through the research, that digital transformation was your number one priority. Of course, digital transformation means enabling your organization to take advantage of technology to differentiate yourself from your competitors, to appeal more to your customers, or to make your organizations more productive, all designed to improve your organization's bottom line. And you were telling us back then, really, that you'd started to reclaim what I think is your rightful place. Really proud to see all IT leaders around the world stand up and enable their organizations to continue to operate in probably the most difficult environment that we've seen in the world for the last 50 or 60 years. Without your input at that time, many of your organizations would have failed. You wouldn't have been able to serve your customers or deliver the services to your constituents that you had in the past. It's a real proud moment there for you all. You should take a moment to pat yourselves on the back. That was only 4 years ago, believe it or not. And then to this year's survey findings. And as I mentioned, there are 3 themes of disruption, which I'll go into just now. The first theme of disruption is disruption coming from new technologies. And here's the big reveal. Artificial intelligence was your number one priority from a technology perspective in 2024. That's the worst kept surprise ever. Now, again, your CEOs have been contacting you to say, can you help me create a strategy, create a vision to harness the power of this amazing technology, help me deliver some of those outcomes from a digital transformation perspective that I mentioned a moment ago, but using the power of artificial intelligence. And on this subject, I'm going to give you the first statistic from our CIO survey now. Globally, 87% of IT leaders said that they'd already established working groups designed to unlock the power of AI. Now, I've always said that Australia is one of the most innovative markets that we work in globally. A lot of the vendors trial their new solutions in this market first before rolling them out globally. And it's interesting to me to see that statistic globally at 87%. Here in Australia, if you zoom in and just look at the Australian responses, rises to 94%. So 94% of Australian respondents are involved in working groups designed to unlock the power of AI for their organisation. Now, whilst you're telling us that there's a huge opportunity in this space and it's your number one priority, you're also telling us that you have some significant concerns associated with artificial intelligence. Those concerns being implementation issues, what happens if the project goes wrong, ethical concerns around data protection, or even the risk of doing nothing. Those are the sorts of concerns that you're facing. And actually, 75% of IT leaders told us that they were apprehensive about the challenges of regulation in this space. So on the one hand, a huge opportunity. On the other hand, some significant challenges that you're seeing overall. And I think your role in this space has to be not only continuing to support your chief exec and your boards and their desires to unlock the potential of artificial intelligence, but also take a role in educating your organizations on some of the challenges that might appear as a consequence of this technology itself. Many of the IT leaders that I speak to around the world are already currently involved in creating policies for their organization designed to sort of mitigate the downside risk of some of these new technologies. Now, we asked our respondents in this year's survey, what are some of the barriers to delivering that AI vision, the digital transformation outputs that you're hoping to achieve? And surprisingly, 75% of respondents globally said that connectivity, good old-fashioned networking, was the key barrier to achieving their goals. I'm actually really surprised by that. And in Australia, it was 85% of respondents said that the network was a key barrier to transformation. And it's in that context that we've seen the re-emergence of another key technology coming from the survey responses this year, and that's IoT. Now, 10 or so years ago, IoT was going to be the next big thing, but it didn't really take off. But it's now starting to re-emerge. And to back up IoT, you've told us that Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, and private 5G are top priorities for you when it comes to getting that next generation of network connectivity in place. And almost 100% of respondents, almost all of you, are investing or planning to invest in private 5G, and I find that fascinating. Okay, so that's the first set of themes from a disruption perspective, technologies. And then the second big reveal, no surprise, theme is that your top concern is cybersecurity. And I think this will be a theme in every single survey for the rest of my career because this is such a hot topic, it will never go away. Perhaps in some way driven by the rise of these new technologies like artificial intelligence and the sophistication that this brings to the threat actors. And we've characterized the responses from the CIOs this year as somewhere between hypervigilance to genuinely paranoid. And I think that's probably the right place for you to sit, somewhere on that spectrum. Now, I'm going to ask for somebody in the audience, anybody in the audience, to be brave enough to answer this question. Let's see if we can get somebody to see if they can answer it. We asked the survey participants, have you suffered a cyber attack in the last 12 months? And I'd like anybody to shout out what percentage globally they think of respondents said that they had suffered a cyber attack in the last 12 months. Anybody, just a random guess. 86, come from over here. Right. Was there a game in Australia in the 80s and 90s called Play Your Cards Right? We did higher or lower. Does anybody think it's higher or lower than 86%? Higher. It's higher. Okay, interesting. Well, we're not going to continue that game. We'll stop there. It was a really good guess. It's globally 83% of respondents suffered a cyber attack in the last 12 months. I think that's actually quite low. But interestingly, in Australia, it was higher than that. If you zone in and just focus on the Australian responses, it was 91% of survey respondents said that they'd suffer a cyber attack here in Australia in the last 12 months. That's significant. I think it also reveals something about the Australian mindset. I think you're just a bit more honest than other people around the rest of the world. Now, with those really high statistics about cyber attacks in the last 12 months, we also asked respondents, how prepared are you to deal with the consequences of a cyber attack? And this was staggering also. Only 40% of respondents said that they felt confident to deal with the consequences of cyber attack. This is quite significant. The prevalence of cyber attacks is everywhere. Basically, everyone has suffered a cyber attack pretty much in the last 12 months, and yet less than half feel confident to deal with the consequences. And I really encourage you all, my advice on this topic is to, whilst it's a very sensitive subject to be talking about, is to share your experiences in this space with each other. That will help build confidence, how you've responded to the attack in your space. And also, it will have this kind of network impact. The more information that you share with each other, the more confident you'll feel to deal with this. And of course, you should feel free and confident to speak to partners like Logicalis who can help in this space. With the lack of resources here, that's what I think is causing this general concern about being able to respond adequately. So, artificial intelligence, IoT, private 5G, networking issues, cybersecurity, as if that wasn't enough on your plate. You've also got this third theme of disruption coming through this year, which is disruption coming from the regulatory environment. And as I said earlier, I'm going to focus here on the sustainability space, environmental sustainability in particular. Most organizations that are listed these days around the world have to report on their ESG activities. And included in that, there's often a requirement to report your carbon footprint, your CO2 footprint, amongst other greenhouse gas emissions and other elements of our environmental footprint activities. And I asked myself, why are regulators asking organizations to report on their carbon emissions? Yes, okay, most governments have a target to hit and they want to see that they're hitting that target, but really, why are you being required to report on this? I think in the next few years, we'll see governments start to tax organizations based on their carbon footprint as they're trying to raise new forms of revenue. And that's why, or at least one of the reasons why, you should take this issue really seriously. Whether or not you believe in the science, whether or not you believe it can help your organization go from strength to strength, whether or not you believe it's the right thing to do from an ethical perspective. Forget all those concerns. At the very least, address it, because at some stage, your organization might be taxed on these issues. But the good news is that almost 100% of survey respondents this year said that they were already involved in sustainability planning and target setting. In other words, your organizations have recognized the need to act in this space, and you're already involved as IT leaders in responding to this. Even more encouraging for me was that 89% of CIOs said that they've got targets to hit in this space. They've been incentivized, in other words, by their CEOs to hit carbon reduction targets overall. That really resonates with me, because in my organization, we started our own carbon reduction journey about 4 years ago. And I only really saw significant improvements in this space when I started to incentivize my team to deliver the outcomes that I wanted to see. So with 89% of you being incentivized, I think we'll start to see some significant movement in this reduction challenge that we have. And 93% of respondents believe that IT is going to be core to the success of their organization's sustainability efforts. That's also really encouraging for me to see that IT leaders believe there's going to be a big role to play of IT. Globally, IT accounts for 4% of total carbon emissions. And whilst that is not a lot in terms of the actual percentage in the share itself today, the forecast growth is phenomenal, such that by 2040, I believe, the share will grow to somewhere between 15 to 20% of total emissions will come from the ICT space. So we've got to do everything we can to minimize the impact of the IT carbon emission footprint. There are some things that we can do in this space as well, and you can rely on Logicalis to not only give you some amazing advice in this space and support you in your activities, but also to hold the vendor community accountable for their targets as well. So, with all of this in mind, What does it mean for you? The so what moment. I think really, in order to maintain your position as a strategic advisor to your board, your executive team, your CEO, you've got to learn to master the balancing act. And that means when you've got your very, very long to-do list, you've got to learn how to prioritize. Dial down the noise that comes from those non-strategic activities, those that add less value to your organization, and really focus on those that do add the value. Stop doing some things if possible. Work with partners like Logicalis to outsource some of those activities if necessary. Delegate where you can those lower value activities so that you can focus all of your brain's capacity on delivering the strategic outcomes that your organization wants to deliver overall. I think if you can do that, you'll leave a legacy that will last for generations to come. So with that, I will pause for a moment and ask, does anybody have any questions? Got a hand raised over there, I think. Can't really see anybody because the lights are glaring in my eyes at the moment. Are you all still there? Yes, you are, yeah.
Thanks, Paul. My question is in regards to the environmental objections of a company. You say that it's very important, the IT teams and the CIO, to deliver on these objectives. I would assume that maybe Australia is slightly behind in that area because of the regulations. We don't have that pressure yet. What would you recommend to CIOs here in the room, where to start that journey and how to help them to achieve these targets in the future?
That's a great question, thanks. I mean, I think the key thing to start is to get yourselves educated. When I say educated, I don't mean go out and get a PhD in the topic. I just mean get a basic level of understanding of some of these key terms that are used in this area of environmental sustainability. Understand what Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, and so on are. These are easy Google searches, Microsoft and Bing searches that you can do to deliver those outcomes, those answers for yourselves. So understand the acronyms that are used in this space. You know, it's a straightforward thing to do to get yourself a base level of understanding so at least you can talk with some confidence about the topic. That's the first thing that I would do. And the second thing that I would do, and this is really critical, is understand what your footprint is today. Understand the baseline that you have from a carbon footprint perspective. There are various tools that the vendors have that we can deploy that can help you establish what that is today, but that's really important so you know the size of the problem that you're dealing with. And then from there, you can think about taking actions. But the first things that I would do, get yourself educated and set that benchmark, that baseline for your carbon footprint today. No problem. Any other questions? I would say that in Sydney, there were about 5 questions coming from the audience. I mean, I don't know if you're competitive, but for what it's worth. No? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time today. Enjoy the rest of today's events. Thank you.